Smarter Markets is back at FIA Boca, and I'm joined by Chris Tripp, General Manager for International at NinjaTrader. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
So we had Anthony on as well, but I've heard this is your first Boca. What do you make of it so far?
Yep, first ever Boca. It's quite the experience, really. So joined NinjaTrader 8 weeks or so ago to head up their international expansion efforts. Everyone on the team was like, you have to come to Boca. It's an amazing experience, great place to meet people, hear about what's going on in the industry. It's kind of very relevant to me as I'm kind of getting my foot in the door, starting to understand how we're going to attack things internationally. But seems to just be a great place where people come from all around the world, all the different exchanges, brokerage firms, to kind of meet up. And I think I've got a lot done in the last few days, more than I would have done kind of sat back in the UK. So it's been really great.
And so 8 weeks in, I got to ask, what brought you to NinjaTrader? What were you working on before that?
I was at a company called IG Group previously, kind of big in the CFD space, but kind of got the opportunity to meet the NinjaTrader guys and kind of straight away kind of saw and what a great business they operated, right? So they've been futures first for the last 20 years, kind of really built their business about kind of catering for the needs for the retail customer. And like everybody on the team that I met was just obsessed with how do we turn traders into kind of better traders and improve their outcomes. And then you've got the kind of platform and everything that goes alongside that. It was kind of an opportunity that I couldn't say no to.
Fantastic. And much of the conversation this week has been 24/7 markets, tokenization, prediction markets, a lot of a focus more on the retail trader and bringing some of that into the institutional markets. I was curious when you kind of listened to the conversations, went to meetings, where do you see maybe some of the gaps between what's being discussed on stage and where traders are at, where the markets are at in their own development?
Yeah, so I think the 24/7 piece is a really interesting one for me, thinking about like international markets, because at Ninja we want to try and get into as many different markets as we possibly can. There's such high demand for US products, regardless of kind of location around the world. So having those be available 24 hours a day, kind of 7 days a week, would be huge for us kind of on an international basis. And especially like the tokenized element of that is really interesting as you start to think about how capital ends up getting deployed around the world, kind of cross-border instant settlements, so people can kind of have greater access to their liquidity across a variety of different assets as well. So all of those topics are like super interesting for us. And like something else that we've really been focusing on whilst I've been here is all about how do we just increase the accessibility of global products as well, because US products is one thing as we think about going internationally, but unless we've got some of those local products that are coming from other parts of the world, we won't even factor in the considerations out for some of those retail customers. So we need to make sure that we harness all the powerful kind of innovation and everything that's going on in the US, but then we're also factoring how do we proposition that through a local lens as well.
And when you say going international, what countries or regions are you focused on first?
So we actually just launched in Europe at the end of last month, which has been great. It's kind of our first foray into international expansion. We're now live all across Europe, which is great. And so now we're kind of figuring out how do we develop the proposition and really kind of cut through in that market and try and get as much traction as we possibly can. And then there's lots of other kind of exciting pockets and different countries that have been popping up over the last few days, like lots of interest in places like Brazil, Korea, as well as the kind of more established kind of APAC markets as well. So we've got lots of opportunity kind of ahead of us, and having the firepower as well that Kraken bring us in terms of their regulatory infrastructure, I think is going to really help us move quite quickly when it comes to our international expansion efforts.
And, as you've been listening to the conversations here, whether on panels or in side meetings, have there been any ideas that have surprised you or ideas that you're like, oh, that's interesting, I'm going to take that away?
There's nothing that kind of immediately springs to mind. Like, I think, we always try and make sure that we're at the kind of forefront of what's going on. And like, people at Ninja are incredibly well connected to the industry. So like this isn't the only kind of opportunity that they have to like talk to people and things. So, it's been good to kind of understand about what's in the pipeline for some partners kind of going forward and how we might be able to kind of lean into that a little bit more.
And are there parts of the whole ecosystem here that you think are a little farther ahead or a little farther behind when it comes to, the tokenization efforts, the 24/7, all the things that'll be important to you?
If I think about the US and kind of the innovation that's clearly like coming to the table and how important that is kind of in terms of a lever to drive growth. I think there's like so many organizations who are doing some incredible stuff in those areas. I think there's especially in the DeFi kind of space, and that's going to be super interesting. I think how we start to like bridge some of those gaps between your kind of traditional TradFi firms versus your kind of decentralized, and how kind of some more of that technology can start to be adopted to kind of mean that settlements quicker and things like that. I think people are kind of getting excited about the kind of headlines that some of that stuff brings. But then I think in terms of like the real world application, going further into, like back office settlement processes, like that's the stuff that retail clients will like really feel as well. Because, if you think about moving your capital around the world and moving your capital into different asset classes as seamlessly as possible, they want to trade the products, but then they also want access to that at the same time. So I think kind of more of that would be great to see.
Right. I think often when people think of 24/7, if you think of it from the perspective of just being in the US, you might think, well, why do I need to trade at night? Maybe I want to go to sleep. But, from a global and from an international perspective, it's always daytime somewhere. How important is that 24/7 to having real international markets?
It's incredibly important because the demand for the US products is there internationally. Like we see that today. And so giving somebody access to that isn't like 2 o'clock in the morning, their time, where they're kind of like, having to stay awake or having to kind of rely on stop losses and things when they're asleep and kind of having that anxiety associated with it, but having the markets open, giving them way more control around their trading and their risk management and things like that is going to be really important for retail clients. And I think once we see more of that 24/7 kind of rollout, the adoption around the world will increase not only the products that we have today, but some of the kind of newer, innovative products that are starting to be spoken about.
And when you think ahead till next year, when it may be your second Boca coming here, what would you like to see the industry make progress on or accomplish over the next year to, help bring some of these ideas and make them realities in markets?
Yeah, I think it's a fast adoption of some of the kind of, um, you know, tokenization elements of the technology that sits behind that. Because I think that's like an incredibly important part of what's going to be core infrastructure for financial markets in the future. And I feel like we're now at this kind of tipping point where we're kind of gone from a lot of institutions trying to like understand how that infrastructure can kind of sit within their ecosystem. Now it starts to feel like people are building on that. So I'd love to be sat here in a year's time with some tangible progress that's been made and some kind of tangible products that are out there for customers to be able to use, that's ultimately benefiting the retail customer and their experience when they're trading with people like NinjaTrader.
Well, it's great to meet you, Chris. Thanks so much for making time for us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.